It was a cold Wednesday evening, around 9:30 p.m., when I decided to run to the Walmart here in Decatur, Illinois. My husband Roger was already asleep, and we needed a few things for the week: milk, eggs, and bread. I thought it'd be a quick trip, in and out, like usual. The store was quiet, with only a few shoppers roaming the aisles. I grabbed a cart and started my usual route, heading first to the produce section. Everything seemed normal. The lights buzzed softly above, and the occasional announcement played over the intercom. As I turned into the canned goods aisle, I noticed him for the first time. He was tall, maybe in his mid-40s, wearing a worn-out Chicago Bears jacket and a baseball cap pulled low over his scruffy face. He wasn't shopping. He was just standing there looking at me. I felt a little uneasy but brushed it off. Maybe he was lost in thought or trying to remember his shopping list. I gave him a polite smile, grabbed a can of soup, and moved on to the cereal aisle. But when I got there, I saw him again. He wasn't at the end of the aisle this time. He was halfway down, leaning against the shelf. His eyes locked on me. My heart skipped a beat. I tried to tell myself it was a coincidence. Maybe he was just headed in the same direction. I grabbed a box of Honey Nut Cheerios and turned my cart toward the frozen food section. When I got there, I froze. He was there too. This time, he wasn't even pretending to shop. He stood at the far end of the aisle staring. I felt a chill run down my spine. My hands gripped the cart tighter, and I tried to focus on the items in front of me. But I couldn't shake the feeling that something was very wrong. I decided to test it. I zigzagged through the store, going from one random aisle to the next. The pet supplies, the home goods, even the seasonal section. And every time, he followed me. Now I was scared. I pretended to scroll through my phone, trying to think of what to do. I even fake called Roger, saying loudly, "I'll be home in just a few minutes." I hoped he'd hear and back off. But when I glanced up, he was still there, standing at the end of the aisle, smiling at me. I couldn't stay in the store any longer. I left my cart and headed toward the front, walking as quickly as I could without breaking into a run. As I neared the entrance, I spotted him again. He was by the self-checkouts, standing between me and the exit. My heart was pounding as I looked around for help. That's when I saw a young employee stocking shelves near the registers. I rushed over to her. "Excuse me," I whispered. "I think someone's following me." Her eyes widened, and she glanced toward the man. She called for her manager, Mr. Carlson, who arrived within minutes. Mr. Carlson was a kind-looking man in his 50s. I explained what had been happening, and he didn't waste any time. He asked another employee to keep an eye on the man while he walked me to the front doors. When we got there, the man was gone. I thought I was safe until Mr. Carlson's radio crackled. The employee monitoring the security cameras spoke up. "The guy's in the parking lot," they said. My stomach dropped. Mr. Carlson stayed with me, insisting I wait inside while he called the police. When the officers arrived, they checked the parking lot but didn't find him. They took my statement and reviewed the security footage. What they found made my skin crawl. The man had entered the store only minutes after I did. He hadn't picked up a single item. From the moment I walked in, he had followed me, aisle by aisle. The police told me they'd patrol the area and advised me to be cautious. But there wasn't much else they could do since he hadn't broken any laws. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every creak of the house made me jump. I kept thinking about his face, that eerie smile. I never saw him again, but I haven't gone shopping alone since. Even now, years later, I still feel like someone's watching me whenever I step into a store. I'll never know what he wanted, and maybe that's the scariest part. It was a Friday night when this happened. I remember it so clearly because it was the weekend before Halloween, and I had stopped by the Walmart in Bloomington, Indiana, to grab a few last-minute decorations for my grandkids. The store was busy, with families picking up costumes and candy. I finished my shopping and checked out around 9 p.m. As I walked toward the parking lot with my bags in hand, I noticed something strange. A young girl, maybe 7 or 8 years old, was sitting on the curb near the far end of the lot. She was alone, hugging her knees to her chest and crying softly. At first, I thought she must have been separated from her parents. I felt my heart sink for her. It was dark and cold, and no child should be out there by herself. I walked over to her slowly, trying not to scare her. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" I asked gently. "Are you lost?" She didn't look up at me right away. She just kept crying, her shoulders shaking. Finally, she mumbled something so softly I could barely hear it. "I can't find my mommy." I felt a pang of sadness for her. I couldn't imagine how scared she must have been. "It's okay," I said, crouching down to her level. "We'll find your mommy. Do you want to come with me back inside so we can get help?" She shook her head quickly, her face still buried in her arms. "She told me to wait here," she whispered. That struck me as odd. Why would a mother leave her child alone in a dark parking lot? But I didn't want to upset her further. "Okay," I said softly. "Do you know your mommy's name? Or her phone number? I can call her for you." The girl didn't answer. Instead, she just kept crying. Something about the situation felt off, but I didn't want to leave her there. "Let's go back inside, sweetie," I said again. "It's warmer in there, and we can talk to the nice people at the service desk. Like, they can help find your mommy." This time she looked up at me and my stomach dropped. Her face was pale, almost gray, and her eyes looked strange, dark and empty, like they weren't even real. It wasn't the face of a scared child, it was something else entirely. I froze, unsure of what to do. My instincts told me to get away, but I felt rooted to the spot. She tilted her head slightly and said, in a voice that was suddenly calm, "She's waiting for you." Before I could react, I heard footsteps behind me. Heavy, fast footsteps. I turned just in time to see a man rushing toward me from between two parked cars. He was tall and thin, wearing a black hoodie pulled low over his face. He was only a few feet away when I screamed and dropped my bags. I ran as fast as I could toward the store, my heart pounding so hard it felt like it would burst. I didn't look back until I was inside. The automatic doors closed behind me, and I turned to see if the man was still there. But he wasn't. The parking lot looked empty. I told the employees at the customer service desk what had happened. They called the police, and a few of them walked me to my car to make sure I was safe. When the police arrived, they checked the parking lot and the security cameras. They didn't find the man or the little girl. But the footage showed something that still makes my skin crawl. The cameras showed me walking toward the girl, just like I remembered. But there was no girl on the curb. I was standing there, talking to no one. The police told me that criminals sometimes use tricks like this to lure people into dangerous situations. They thought the man might have been waiting for me to get distracted so he could rob me, or worse. But I know what I saw. I saw a little girl sitting there, crying. I heard her voice. "I don't go to Walmart at night anymore. I don't even like being in parking lots alone. Every time I think about that night, I get chills." What scares me most isn't just the man, it's the girl. I still wonder what she was, or if she was even real at all. I've worked the night shift at the Walmart here in Springfield, Missouri, for about 5 years now. It's usually quiet at night, which I don't mind. Most of the time, it's just a few regulars coming in for last-minute items or people stopping by after a late shift. But one night, about a year ago, something happened that I'll never forget. It was a little after 11 p.m., and I was stocking shelves in the toy aisle. The store was nearly empty, except for a handful of customers. I had my cart of toys and was organizing the shelves when I noticed a man walking down the aisle. He didn't have a cart or a basket, which is unusual for someone shopping this late. He was tall and skinny, wearing a dark hoodie and jeans. At first, I didn't think much of it. People wander through the aisles all the time, but something about him seemed off. He wasn't looking at the toys or the shelves. He was just walking slowly, glancing around like he was looking for someone. His movements were jittery, almost nervous. I kept my eye on him as I worked. He walked past me and turned the corner, heading toward the electronics section. I didn't think too much about it until I heard one of my coworkers, Maria, call out on the radio. Is anyone near electronics?" she asked. "There's a guy over here acting kind of weird." I grabbed my walkie and responded. "I saw him too. I think he just walked back there. What's going on?" Maria sounded uneasy. "He's just standing by the TVs. Not looking at anything, just watching people." I told her I'd come over to check it out. As I walked toward electronics, I kept looking around to see if I could spot him. The store was quiet, and the fluorescent lights made everything feel even more eerie. When I got there, Maria was standing behind the counter, looking nervous. "He's over there," she whispered, nodding toward the back of the section. I glanced over and saw him standing near the display TVs. He wasn't doing anything, just standing there with his hands in his pockets, staring at a young woman who was shopping for headphones. "Did he buy anything?" I asked Maria quietly. She shook her head. "No, he's been wandering around for at least 20 minutes. I decided to approach him. "Excuse me, sir," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can I help you find something?" He didn't answer right away. He just turned his head slowly to look at me. His eyes were dark, and his face was pale, almost like he hadn't seen sunlight in years. Finally, he muttered, "I'm just looking." The way he said it made my skin crawl. It wasn't what he said, it was how he said it. His voice was flat, with no emotion, like he didn't care if I believed him or not. I nodded and stepped back. "Let us know if you need any help," I said, and walked back to Maria. "We should call the manager," I told her. She nodded and radioed Mr. Davis, our night manager. By the time Mr. Davis arrived, the man was gone. We thought he might have left the store, but then I spotted him near the grocery section, still following the young woman from electronics. I felt a knot in my stomach. Something wasn't right. He wasn't shopping, and he wasn't leaving her alone. Mr. Davis walked over to him and said, "Sir, is there a problem? You've been walking around the store for a while now." The man didn't say anything for a moment. Then he muttered, "I'm just waiting for someone." Mr. Davis didn't buy it. "Who are you waiting for?" he asked. The man didn't answer. Instead, he turned and walked away toward the back of the store. Mr. Davis decided to call the police. While we waited for them to arrive, we kept an eye on the man through the security cameras. He wasn't waiting for anyone. He was just wandering around the store, following random people. When the police arrived, they approached him near the home goods section. At first, he acted like nothing was wrong, but then they asked for his ID. That's when he got defensive. He started yelling, saying he hadn't done anything wrong. The officers calmed him down and eventually escorted him out of the store. They told us they couldn't arrest him since he hadn't broken any laws, but they'd keep an eye on him. After he left, we all felt uneasy. Maria and I checked on the young woman he had been following, and she was visibly shaken. "I thought he was just a strange customer at first," she said, "but then he kept showing up in every aisle I went to. I was about to leave when you guys stepped in." The rest of the night felt tense. Every time I walked down an aisle, I found myself looking over my shoulder, half expecting him to come back. He didn't. But I'll never forget the way he looked at people. It wasn't just strange, it felt predatory, like he was studying them. I work at the Walmart here in Cedar Rapids. I've been there for about 3 years, mostly working the night shift. It's usually quiet at night, and most shoppers just grab what they need and leave. But one night, something happened that still gives me chills. It was a little after 10 p.m. The store was getting quiet since we were close to closing. I was up front, stocking candy and drinks near the registers. That's when I noticed a woman pacing back and forth near the entrance. She looked like she was in her 30s, wearing a gray hoodie and jeans. She didn't have a cart or basket, which was a bit strange. Most people late at night have a purpose. They grab what they need and leave. But this woman just paced, looking toward the doors every few seconds like she was waiting for something or someone. I walked over and asked, "Ma'am, do you need any help?" She flinched like I had startled her. "No, I'm fine," she said quickly, not looking me in the eye. I shook my head and went back to work, but I kept watching her. Something about the way she was acting felt off. A few minutes later, the automatic doors opened and a man walked in. He was tall and broad, wearing a black leather jacket. As soon as the woman saw him, her face went pale, and she froze in place. The man scanned the store, and when his eyes landed on her, he smirked. The tension in the air was thick. It was clear they knew each other, but whatever their relationship was, it wasn't good. The man walked toward her slowly. "I told you I'd find you," he said, his voice low and mean. The woman took a step back, her hands shaking. "Leave me alone," she whispered. "I'm not going back." My stomach dropped. This wasn't a normal situation. Something was seriously wrong. I looked around for my manager, but he was in the back of the store. I grabbed my radio and quietly said, "We need someone at the front, now." The man moved closer to her, his voice getting angrier. "You think you can just walk away from me?" The woman looked at me for a second, her eyes full of fear. That was all I needed to act. I walked over, trying to stay calm. "Excuse me," I said loudly. "Is everything okay here?" The man turned to me, glaring. "Mind your own business," he snapped. I stood my ground, even though I was nervous. "If there's a problem, I can get my manager," I said. The woman used the moment to step back from him. Her voice was barely a whisper when she said, "Please, call the police." The man's face turned red with anger. He clenched his fists, and I could tell he was ready to explode. At that moment, my manager, Mr. Davis, and a couple of coworkers arrived. Mr. Davis walked straight up to the man. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave," he said firmly. The man didn't move. He started yelling, saying it was none of our business and that the woman was his girlfriend. He claimed they were just having a small argument. But the woman finally spoke up, louder this time. "He's been following me," she said. "I left him weeks ago, and he won't leave me alone." That's when one of my coworkers called the police. The man got even angrier and tried to argue with Mr. Davis. But when the police arrived, they didn't waste any time. They took the man outside and talked to the woman. She was shaking and crying, but she managed to tell them everything. She said she had left him because he was dangerous, and she was scared he would hurt her. The police ended up taking the man away. The woman thanked us over and over, tears streaming down her face. After they left, I couldn't stop thinking about how bad things could have gotten if we hadn't stepped in. I've dealt with tough customers before, but this was different. This was about someone's safety. Now, whenever I'm at work, I pay more attention to the people in the store. You never know when someone might need your help. That night taught me that sometimes just speaking up can make all the difference. I've worked at the Walmart in Des Moines, Iowa for almost 4 years now. I'm used to the late-night shifts where the store feels quieter, almost eerie. Most people who come in late are either tired or in a rush to grab something and leave. But one night, something happened that I still can't explain. It was a Thursday night, a little after 10 p.m. I was working in the clothing section, folding shirts and restocking the racks. The store was almost empty, just a few customers wandering around. The quiet hum of the overhead lights and the occasional announcement over the speakers made the place feel even more still. I was folding a stack of jeans near the fitting rooms when I noticed her. She was a young girl, maybe 10 or 11 years old, standing just outside the fitting room area. She had long, dark hair that looked a little messy, and she was wearing a pale pink dress that seemed too light for the cold weather outside. She was standing perfectly still, not looking at the clothes or the mirrors, just staring at the floor. "Hi there," I said with a smile, trying to sound friendly. "Are you here with someone?" She didn't answer. She didn't even look up at me. I stepped a little closer, concerned. "Are you lost? Do you need help?" Still nothing. She just stood there, completely still. I felt a strange chill run through me. Something about her didn't feel right. Maybe it was the way she was so quiet, or the fact that she was alone in a place where most kids would be with a parent. "Okay," I said gently. "If you need anything, let me know." I turned back to my work, but I kept glancing at her out of the corner of my eye. She stayed in the same spot for what felt like several minutes, not moving an inch. Then, without a sound, she turned and walked into the fitting room area. I waited for a moment, thinking she might have gone in to try something on, but she hadn't taken any clothes with her. Feeling uneasy, I walked over to the fitting rooms. "Hello?" I called out softly. "Are you okay in there?" There was no response. I checked the stall doors. They were all open except for the one at the end. It was closed. I hesitated for a moment, then knocked gently on the door. "Are you all right in there?" I asked again. No answer. I felt my heart beating faster. Something about the silence made my skin crawl. "Miss, if you need help, just let me know," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. I waited a few more seconds, but there was still no sound from the stall. I decided to step away, and give her some space, thinking maybe she was shy or scared. I went back to folding clothes, but I couldn't shake the uneasy feeling. I kept glancing toward the fitting rooms, waiting for her to come out. But she didn't. After about 10 minutes, I decided to check again. I walked back to the fitting room area, my hands feeling clammy. The door to the last stall was still closed. "Miss?" I called out, knocking again. No response. I leaned down to look under the door, and my stomach dropped. The stall was empty. There were no feet, no shadows, nothing. I opened the door slowly, half expecting to find her hiding inside. But the stall was completely empty. There was no way she could have left without me seeing her. I was standing just outside the fitting rooms the entire time. A cold shiver ran down my spine. I checked the other stalls again, even though I knew they were empty. The entire area was silent, and there was no sign of the girl. I tried to tell myself I must have missed her somehow, that maybe she slipped out when I wasn't looking. But deep down, I knew that didn't make sense. I had been watching the fitting rooms the whole time. I walked back to the register area, feeling unsettled. My coworker, Sarah, was there organizing a display of socks. "Hey, did you see a little girl come out of the fitting rooms?" I asked her. Sarah looked up, confused. "What girl?" "She was about 10 or 11, wearing a pink dress," I said. "She went into the fitting rooms, but now she's gone." Sarah frowned. "I didn't see anyone like that. Are you sure?" I shook my head, feeling more uneasy by the second. "She was just there. I don't know where she went." Sarah shrugged. "Maybe she left. This place gives me the creeps at night, though. I don't like working back here alone." I tried to shake it off and went back to my work, but I couldn't stop thinking about the girl. I kept replaying the moment in my head, her standing there, so still, and then disappearing without a trace. The rest of the night passed uneventfully, but I couldn't wait to get home. The next day, I mentioned the incident to my manager. I expected her to brush it off, but instead, her expression changed. "A little girl in a pink dress?" she asked slowly. I shook my head, feeling a lump form in my throat. "Yeah." "Why?" She hesitated, then said, "You're not the first person to mention her. A few employees have seen her over the years, usually at night. She always disappears before anyone can talk to her." My blood ran cold. "Who is she?" "No one knows," my manager said. "But there's a rumor that a girl went missing near here years ago. Some people say she's still looking for her mom." I didn't know what to say. The thought of it made my stomach churn. Since that night, I've tried to avoid working in the clothing section late at night. I haven't seen the girl again, but I still feel uneasy every time I walk past the fitting rooms. Even now, I can't explain what happened. Was she real, or was she something else entirely? All I know is that I'll never forget the look of her. So still, so silent, and so out of place. And I'll never forget the way she vanished. Like she was never really there at all.